No one will ever believe you. Those were the alleged words of Noel Fisher, aka Detail, super producer, to a woman that he had just traumatized for life. But it was far worse than just that. Feds want to tap up men and wire up men like Chubbs did Detail. Those were the lyrics on Drake's song War back in 2019. While this largely went over the heads of many casual listeners, it refers to an incident where Chubbs, Drake's right-hand man and muscle, beat the producer Detail so badly that he had to be hospitalized and have his jaw wired shut back in 2014. The question is, why would this even happen? Detail had been known to work with Young Money on plenty of songs. He produced 3 songs on Drake's Nothing Was the Same album: Own It, 305 to My City, and Paris Morton Music 2. Drake has also spoken highly of him in the past, saying the following: "My biggest thing this time was working with my vocal coach, just really finding a different tone. Detail is a huge influence on that as well. I've never had a vocal producer other than 40, and there were nights where 40 would leave the studio and let Detail vocal produce me. What's different about Detail, I'll do a verse in one take with 40. Detail would make me go line by line. It was annoying at first, like who is this guy to tell me I'm not doing it right? But when I listened to the finished product, there'd be so much emotion in every line that it was almost like somebody different rapping." So why would Drake have him beat so bad? Well, what Detail alleged in the lawsuit is that in 2014, the same year he gave that interview, Drake offered Detail a role to produce exclusively for him, to which Detail declined in order to still work with other artists. What Detail claimed happened next is that Drake invited him to a studio session at 2 a.m. in Calabasas, where he was confronted by Chubbs, that sucker punched him and broke his jaw. He then claims Chubbs said the following: "I'll beat all your asses, including your chicks. I don't give a F, I will hit you again. Do you think Drake is soft? You think Drake's a punk?" Detail then claimed that he was so hurt he couldn't work for a year and asked Drake multiple times to cover his medical bills, to which Drake refused, and then he decided to proceed with the lawsuit. Funny enough though, this lawsuit didn't go anywhere. Detail never even gave an official statement, and I don't believe the lawsuit was ever even filed. At this time, fans just thought Drake was trying to be the tough guy, trying to pose as a gangster. Why else would he beat up a damn near super producer? Just for some context, Detail produced Sexy Can I for Ray J, How to Love for Lil Wayne, Drunken Love for Beyonce and Jay-Z, and many other massive songs and albums. Well, people would soon come to find out that Drake may have been ahead of his time, because in 2018 there were legal documents pulled by TMZ for a restraining order filed on Detail by 2 women, saying the following. One of the women is a singer named Christina Bush, and she claimed Detail essayed her back in February after a recording session in Miami. According to docs obtained by TMZ, he forced her to engage in explicit acts with him in front of others. Christina claims he got violent last week while they were at the Malibu Beach Inn. In the doc, she says he forcibly grabbed her by the hair, hit, and choked her. Christina claims he bit her lip during the tirade, and she was left with bruises on her arms, head, back, and legs. A second artist named Peyton Ackley accuses Detail of essentially making her and Christina his S-slaves. Peyton says she considered Detail a mentor in the industry, but he told her the biz was all about sex. According to the docs, Detail walked in on Peyton taking a bath and forced her to have S with him in front of another producer. She also claims he forced her to take nude photos while he played with himself, and also forced her to record him engaging in acts with Christina. In March, she says he got violent and slammed her head into a wall and dragged her up a flight of stairs. Both women requested restraining orders, which a judge granted, and Detail must now stay 100 yards from both of them, as well as Christina's sister. This all came out during a time when #MeToo was going on, and a lot of people weren't just jumping to believe any story anymore. However, there was much more to this. These girls weren't even looking for clout. They had been terrorized and they disappeared afterwards, opting out of doing any media. And this was the detailed complaint that Christina B. filed in the court documents. The complaint, filed on December 27, 2018, alleges that respondent had a burgeoning career as a model when she met appellant, Detail is appellant, who as a well-known musical producer and artist promised musical stardom for her with him as the guiding light of that career. Although appellant essayed respondent on a joint trip to Miami, respondent managed to begin recording under a production deal generated by Detail. Nonetheless, the sexual, emotional, and physical abuse continued from January 2017 to May of 2018, with 6 more essays and a great deal of emotional and physical abuse, with respondent increasingly dependent on appellant for the basic necessities of life. This continued until respondent's sister appeared on the scene in May 2018 and took charge, taking respondent first to the hospital and then to the police to report the essays and abuse. The victims in this case weren't anybody popular, but what followed was interesting and out of the norm. Several successful singers and musicians would come out sharing their stories of being terrorized by Detail, the first being Jessie Reyes. One night over 6 years ago, Noelle Detail Fisher tried this on me. I was lucky and I got out before it got to this. I don't know what to say or who to tell. I was scared. Fear is a real thing. The girls that came out are brave as hell. She even admitted that her 2017 song Gatekeeper was written about Detail, with lyrics like $20 million in a car, girl tie your hair up if you want to be a star, 30 million people want a shot, how much would it take for you to spread those legs apart? This wasn't the only female artist to speak up either. BB Rexa replied to the story sharing her own experience with Detail. He tried to do the same thing to me when I was a new artist, adding, "Glad these women came out. It's scary. He tried to with me, but I literally ran out of that studio. Karma is a B." Even Tinashe added her own experience. "The only session I've been in to this day where I left due to being so uncomfortable. Glad he's being exposed for the effing creep he is." This already makes the story look even crazier, but it gets worse, or better depending on how you look at it. In the lawsuit, Detail loses and the defendant wins a $15 million judgment because neither Detail nor his lawyers responded to any summons or filed any documents related to the case. After those lawsuits were going to default judgments, Detail and his lawyers started scrambling, filing documents to try and fight them in the coming months, but it was too late. Detail's excuse was that he never received notices about the lawsuits because he lost his home and work addresses after the allegations emerged. It caused him to lose job opportunities and had him evicted. We're in 2019 now. Some doubters might still say, well, this was a civil lawsuit, he didn't even fight it, perhaps they were looking to get a bag, which they were awarded. There are no criminal charges here. Well, don't speak too soon. In August of 2020, Noelle Fisher, aka Detail, was arrested and taken to custody in Santa Clarita, California for 15 SA charges. The incidents occurred between 2010 and 2018. In January 2020, detectives submitted the case to the Los Angeles County District Attorney's Office for review, according to the LASD. On July 31, 2020, detectives were notified that 15 SA charges and 5 additional felony assault-related charges were filed against Fisher. A felony arrest warrant was issued with a bail of $6.29 million, according to sheriff's officials. On August 5th, Fisher was arrested by personnel from the Sheriff's Department Major Crimes Bureau. He has not bonded out since then and has been going to court dates ever since, with his trial not officially starting yet. During one of his preliminary court dates in June of 2021, where Detail was now facing 26 counts of SA or grape, 2 different alleged victims, CD and AO, would share their story. CD claims that she escaped a 10-minute attack from Detail in 2010 where he pinned her legs down and locked her in a room with him. Another woman, AO, had a longer story in which she met Detail in 2010 as well when he invited her and her friend to his home. She said they hung out at his studio, talking about how he was producing a Nicki Minaj song and spending the night in a room by herself, and exchanging numbers with Detail afterwards. Months go by and she said she was back in LA and had brief communication with Detail, having sent him, quote, 2 to 3 innocent pictures. And after leaving the club with only 1 drink in her system, she and her friend met Detail for food in Hollywood. When she and her friend pulled up to the restaurant, Detail and his bodyguard had already arrived, AO said, in a large Mercedes van. When the bodyguard and her friend went in to get food, the 21-year-old AO said Fisher asked her to get in the van, and she did. "We were just talking, then he got really aggressive. He started blowing on my neck. I remember vividly he just kept coming onto me, like putting his body onto me, and I told him to back up, give me some space. You know what you came here for. You know who I am," Fisher replied, according to AO. It was at that point AO said Fisher grabbed her arm, turned her away from him, and forced her face by applying pressure on the back of her neck with either his hand or arm into the crevice of one of the van's middle row seats. She screamed a handful of times before giving up, she said, before her voice was muffled by the chair. It was then that, she says, the defendant pulled her underwear to the side and essayed her in both cavities. The penetration lasted a total of 3 minutes, she said, but she testified feeling extreme pain and thinking of her child back home waiting for him. At that point, I just stopped fighting him. At that point, I just wanted it to be over with. She then testified that, although unsuccessful at first to escape Fisher, trying to leave the van by kicking at him and struggling with him, He let go of the back of her neck after ejaculating into a condom. She put herself together and ran out of the van, mascara running down her face, crying, and her friend followed closely behind after exiting the restaurant. Upon hearing what happened, Ayo's friend asked her if she wanted to go to the police or a hospital, to which the 21-year-old single mother said no, she testified. She said she didn't want to go to the authorities and risk having the public, her family, or new nursing coworkers know what had happened to her, saying she felt scared, in pain, and embarrassed. After that incident, all electronic communication between her and Fisher ceased, she said. A handful of months later, Ayo testified she ran into Fisher at the club. "No one will ever believe you," is what Fisher said to her, Ayo testified Thursday. Detail would return to court again on September 12, 2022, in which he was updated on the fact that he now had 30 charges filed against him, including forcible rape, assault by means of force likely to produce great bodily injury, forcible oral copulation, sodomy by use of force, and false imprisonment by violence. This guy was allegedly causing havoc, and it was said that he would have to show up on January 6, 2023 for a pre-trial conference. Well, it's January 2024 now, and where is Detail? Still in jail, with no updates, and the trial is yet to begin, which tells us several things. Detail is either struggling financially or doesn't have the funds to both afford the bond to get out of jail, as well as the expensive lawyer it's going to cost to defend himself. It also tells us that Drake likely, potentially, got wind of what was going on, and it may have happened while Detail was around him or used his name to attack females, and he was furious that he could have potentially been linked to a story and abuse like that. As of this point, all the information says that there were at least a dozen women who either had already shown up to one of the court dates or are willing to testify against Detail for what he allegedly did to them. We have heard a lot of stories in the music industry, a good amount of, quote, power imbalances, which is an interesting term to say the least, considering the natural power imbalance and strength between a man and a woman is far greater than any professional imbalance in roles could ever match up to, but also coercion, blackmail, etc. But this is the first case that I've ever seen that involves the straight-up rabid rape on countless women that can only be conducted by a feral animal. Yet it has been the least covered story of all the other accusations we've seen in the past 6 years or so. Granted, Detail's work was far more popular than him as a face or a brand, but still, his alleged crimes speak way louder than his work, and enough for it to be talked about more than it has. I'm interested in seeing how justice pans out. Detail at the moment, if he's found guilty of everything, is facing a maximum sentence of 225 years.